It was a normal Friday afternoon, the kind where the sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden glow over the quiet streets. Cars moved slowly, kids rode bicycles, and the smell of fresh-cut grass drifted from the yards. One teenager, a 17-year-old boy with a dark hoodie and a backpack, walked down the sidewalk, listening to music through his earbuds. He had just finished basketball practice and was looking forward to getting home, taking a shower and eating a late lunch. He had no idea that this ordinary day was about to turn into something frightening, something that would stay with him for a long time. The boy noticed a car slowing down behind him. At first, he thought it was just another driver cautious about the neighborhood kids playing outside. But then he saw the officers inside the car watching him closely. His stomach tightened. He turned off his music, hoping that by being calm and non-threatening he could avoid any misunderstanding. He slowed his pace but kept moving, unsure why they were watching him so carefully. The car pulled over and two uniformed officers stepped out. Their hands hovered near their belts and their eyes never left him. Fear gripped him. He was confused and scared. "Am I in trouble?" he thought. He raised his hand slightly, hoping that showing he meant no harm would help. "Hey, I'm just walking home from basketball practice," he said, his voice calm but nervous. The officers ignored him. "Stop right there," one shouted. The command made his heart race faster. He froze, unsure whether to comply fully or move cautiously. Every instinct told him to cooperate, but every second felt heavier than the last. The officers ordered him to lie face down on the ground. His backpack slipped off his shoulder and fell to the pavement, spilling its contents: books, notebooks, and a pair of worn-out sneakers. The boy tried to explain himself again, but his voice seemed to disappear into the tense air around them. Neighbors peeked out of their windows and a few people came closer, some filming the scene with their phones. The teenager felt humiliated and powerless. He couldn't understand why this was happening. He was a good kid, careful, respectful, and had never been in serious trouble. Yet here he was, treated like a criminal for no reason he could see. The situation began to escalate quickly. One officer grabbed his arm roughly, pushing him further toward the ground. The boy winced, his breath catching in his throat, but he didn't resist. He remembered his mother's advice. "Stay calm, don't argue, and keep your hands visible." He clung to that thought, trying to steady his racing heart. Tears pricked his eyes and he whispered again, "Please, I didn't do anything." The officers shouted over him, telling him to stop talking, their voices sharp and commanding. Every movement, every second felt dangerous. The boy's mind raced with questions. Why him? What had he done wrong? Was anyone watching closely enough to understand the truth? People nearby began murmuring. Some shouted in his defense, their voices small against the officer's authority. "He's just a kid," one woman yelled from a store doorway. Others filmed, their phones trembling in their hands. The officers seemed to grow more impatient, more rigid. The teenager's heart pounded in his chest and he felt a mix of anger, fear, and confusion. He didn't understand why this simple walk home had turned into a confrontation that felt life-threatening. And then, just as the tension reached its peak, a voice cut through the noise. It was calm, sharp, and commanding, demanding attention without raising panic. "What's going on here?" The officers turned, surprised and irritated. The sound of the voice made them hesitate for the first time. The teenager turned slightly and saw a woman walking briskly toward them, her step sure and confident. She carried herself with an authority that made the officers stop in their tracks. The crowd sensed it too, some whispering, some holding their phones tighter as they continued recording. The woman was his mother, an FBI agent who had seen and handled tense situations many times before. She had been driving home from a nearby federal meeting when she noticed the commotion. Her trained eyes instantly recognized her son's jacket on the ground, the hoodie that he wore almost every day. She didn't panic. Instead, she approached with purpose, her badge ready, her voice firm. "Step away from him," she said. The officers froze. The commanding tone left no room for argument. They stammered, one saying, "Ma'am, this is a police matter." But she cut him off, showing her badge with precision. "I am a federal officer. That is my son. Explain yourself now." The teenager slowly stood up, still shaken but relieved to see his mother. Her presence gave him strength, though the sting of humiliation and fear still lingered. The crowd's murmurs grew louder as the scene shifted. The officers looked nervous, unsure of how to proceed. The woman's voice didn't waver. A description? A teenager walking home with a backpack? You didn't check his ID, you didn't ask questions, and you drew your weapons on him. The officers exchanged uneasy glances, realizing they had misjudged the situation entirely. The tension was palpable. The mother's training and authority diffused the immediate danger, but the teenager's mind still raced. He had felt fear like never before. The feeling of being targeted, of being assumed guilty simply because of his appearance, stayed with him even as his mother held him close. She whispered quietly, "Are you okay?" And he nodded, though tears were still rolling down his cheeks. He felt safe, but he also understood the fragility of that safety. Bystanders continued to record and murmur. The officers knew they had made a mistake, and their faces reflected both embarrassment and the realization of how serious the situation had become. The teenager's mother stayed firm, her eyes on the officers, ensuring no further actions would escalate. She calmly instructed him to pick up his belongings, making sure he understood that he was safe now. The spilled books and sneakers symbolized the disruption of an ordinary day, a visual reminder of how quickly normal life could turn upside down. The teenager looked around, noticing the expressions on the faces of the people nearby. Some were sympathetic, some were shocked, and others were quietly observing, unsure of what to do. In that moment, he realized that the world could sometimes be unfair, but that courage, knowledge, and presence of mind could make a difference. His mother's presence had changed everything. She had taken control of the situation with calm authority, protecting him from harm and ensuring that the officers understood the gravity of their actions. As they walked away from the immediate scene, the teenager felt a mixture of relief and lingering fear. The ordinary day he had expected had turned into a confrontation he would never forget. Yet he also felt pride in his mother's strength and in the way she handled the situation. He understood that this experience would shape him, that it would stay with him, and that he had learned lessons about courage, authority, and standing up for oneself even in moments of vulnerability. The street returned to a semblance of normalcy. Cars continued to pass, neighbors resumed their activities, and the sun continued to cast its golden light. But for the teenager, and for those who witnessed the incident, nothing would feel quite the same. The ordinary had met the extraordinary, and the ordinary would never be the same again. Fear, authority, injustice, and protection had collided in a way that would leave a lasting impression, and in the teenager's mind one thought lingered. Sometimes, it takes the presence of someone who understands both fear and authority to turn a dangerous moment into safety, to remind the world that even ordinary days can carry extraordinary lessons. The moment the officers realized who had arrived on the scene, a shift occurred in the air. They went from aggressive and controlling to uneasy, almost hesitant. The teenager's mother, an experienced FBI agent, exuded calm authority, and every step she took toward them made it clear she would not tolerate any further misjudgment or misconduct. The teenager, still trembling, felt a sense of relief wash over him, but the fear and embarrassment of the earlier moments remained heavy on his shoulders. As she approached, she scanned the scene quickly, noting the dropped backpack, the books scattered across the pavement, and the nervous expressions on the faces of the officers. Her instincts kicked in immediately, as if she had done this 100 times before. She didn't yell or panic. Instead, she commanded attention with her mere presence. "Step away from him," she said firmly, displaying her badge and identification. The officers froze, unsure of how to respond. Their hands no longer hovered near their holsters, and the tension in their posture was replaced by uncertainty. The teenager's mother knelt slightly to help him gather his belongings. He picked up his books and sneakers, feeling the heat rise to his cheeks with every second the crowd watched. She whispered, "It's okay, you're safe now. Just stay calm." Her voice was steady, reassuring, and unlike the harsh tones of the officers, it had a soothing effect on him. He nodded silently, grateful but still shaken, trying to make sense of what had happened. The officers exchanged glances, their earlier confidence fading. One of them tried to speak, stammering, "Ma'am, we were just following procedure." But she cut him off. "Procedure? Do you call this procedure? You drew weapons on a child walking home from school. You humiliated him. You should know better." The crowd murmured, sensing the intensity of the confrontation. People were filming, capturing the scene from every angle. The teenager, holding his backpack close, realized that this moment was being witnessed by many, and the power of his mother's presence became more apparent. One of the bystanders stepped forward, trying to speak up. "He didn't do anything," they said. The mother's eyes met theirs briefly, acknowledging their concern without losing focus on the officers. She continued to address them, her voice unwavering. "You need to explain your actions immediately. Who thought it was acceptable to target a minor based on appearance alone?" The officers remained silent, their discomfort growing as they realized the gravity of the situation. They had misjudged the teenager, and now they were facing the consequences of their actions in front of witnesses and a federal agent. The teenager watched his mother with a mix of awe and relief. She wasn't just someone who could protect him, she was someone who commanded respect and authority. He felt a wave of pride, even as the embarrassment lingered. The thought of how quickly things could have turned violent haunted him, but her presence had prevented that from happening. He realized that not everyone had someone like her to step in when things went wrong. Many kids faced situations like this alone, without anyone to intervene. As the situation continued, the crowd grew larger. Neighbors who had been watching from their windows came outside, curious about the commotion. Some whispered among themselves. Others quietly recorded the events. The teenager's mother kept her focus on the officers, not allowing the attention of the crowd to distract her. She knew the importance of maintaining control, not just for her son's safety, but to ensure the officers understood the seriousness of their actions. One officer finally attempted to explain, saying that the teenager matched a description they had been given. His mother's eyes narrowed slightly. "A description?" she asked sharply. "A teenager walking home with a backpack matches a description? Do you check IDs, ask questions, or think before you act? Oh, you just assume, you escalate, and you risk someone's life. How is that policing?" Her words were direct and unyielding. The officers shifted uneasily, realizing they had no satisfactory answer. They had acted on assumption, and now they faced accountability in real time. The teenager, still holding his belongings, felt a mix of emotions. Anger, fear, relief, and pride all swirled inside him. He wanted to say something, to speak up for himself, but the words caught in his throat. He let his mother handle the confrontation, knowing she was capable of articulating the situation better than he could. Yet he understood the importance of what was happening. He was witnessing firsthand how authority could be used responsibly to protect, rather than intimidate, someone vulnerable. The mother's tone remained firm but composed. She addressed the officers directly, explaining the impact of their actions on her son and on the community. "You have a duty to protect and serve," she said. "Not to profile, not to intimidate, and not to assume guilt based on appearance. This is a lesson in accountability, and I hope you take it seriously." The officers nodded silently, their earlier confidence replaced by acknowledgement of their misstep. The crowd continued to watch, some whispering about what had just happened, others shaking their heads in disbelief at how quickly things could escalate. After a few tense moments, the mother guided her son away from the officers, ensuring he was physically safe and emotionally supported. The teenager felt a sense of security returning, though the memory of the officer's aggressive behavior remained vivid. His mother's steady hand on his shoulder reassured him that he was no longer alone, that someone was watching out for him and would not allow him to be treated unjustly. As they walked a short distance from the immediate scene, she spoke to him quietly, reminding him to stay calm and composed. "Breathe and remember, you did nothing wrong." "This was not your fault," she said. The teenager nodded, still shaken but beginning to regain his composure. He realized how quickly fear could take over, but also how powerful calm authority and presence could be in diffusing a dangerous situation. The crowd began to disperse slowly, some whispering about what they had witnessed, others still recording. The teenager's mother stayed close, ensuring that he remained safe and that the officers did not attempt to escalate further. She knew the importance of remaining vigilant until the situation was fully under control. Her training and experience allowed her to anticipate potential issues and address them before they could arise. For the teenager, the events of that afternoon would stay with him for a long time. He had felt fear like never before, a fear that was amplified by misunderstanding and assumptions. But he had also felt protection, guidance, and authority in its most responsible form. He realized that the world could be unpredictable and sometimes unfair, but that courage, knowledge, and presence of mind could make a significant difference. His mother had turned a frightening moment into a safe one, demonstrating the power of calm, authoritative intervention. As the sun continued to lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the street, the teenager walked beside his mother, holding his backpack tightly. The ordinary day he had expected had turned into an experience that was extraordinary in its lessons and impact. He understood that fear and courage often exist side by side, and that sometimes it takes the presence of someone who knows both to ensure safety and justice. The teenager knew that this moment would shape him, that it would influence how he saw authority, safety, and justice. He had witnessed firsthand the impact of a calm, knowledgeable presence in a tense situation. He had learned that standing up for what is right, even in moments of vulnerability, can change the outcome entirely. And though the embarrassment and fear lingered, he also felt empowered, knowing that he had someone who would always protect him and ensure that fairness and justice were served. The teenager and his mother stood side by side, the tension from moments ago still thick in the air. Though he felt a measure of safety, his heart still raced and his hands trembled slightly as he clutched his backpack. He could feel the eyes of the officers on them, heavy with a mix of embarrassment, uncertainty, and perhaps a dawning realization of their mistake. His mother didn't speak immediately. Instead, she surveyed the area carefully, noting every detail, the scattered books, the position of the officers, and the few onlookers who lingered, filming and whispering among themselves. She finally addressed the officers, her voice calm yet commanding. "I want a clear explanation of why you thought it was acceptable to treat my son this way," she said. Her tone brooked no argument. The officers shifted uncomfortably, one scratching the back of his neck, the other glancing down at the ground. They muttered something about a description they were following, but it was clear they were grasping for words, unsure of how to justify their actions. The mother didn't let them off the hook. "A description?" she repeated, her gaze sharp. "Do you know what description fits? Walking home with a backpack? Because that is exactly what he was doing, and yet you thought it was appropriate to draw your weapons, to push him down, to humiliate a child." The teenager stayed close, listening to his mother, feeling a mix of awe and relief. He had never seen her like this, fully in command, fearless and precise. He realized that he had never understood just how much authority and training could influence a situation. He had grown up hearing stories of her work, but this was the first time he truly saw it in action. The crowd around them murmured, some nodding in agreement, others whispering in disbelief at what they had witnessed. Every phone camera in sight seemed pointed at the scene, capturing the tension, the confrontation, and the authority of the mother. The officers were silent now, their earlier confidence completely gone. One of them finally attempted to justify himself, saying they had been following a protocol designed to protect the community. His mother's eyes narrowed. "Protocol that targets innocent children? Protocol that risks someone's life for no reason? This is not protection. This is intimidation and misconduct. You need to understand the weight of your actions." Her words were precise, measured, but carried the force of someone who had spent years enforcing justice. She did not raise her voice unnecessarily, but every word landed like a stone in calm water, sending ripples of realization through the officers and the crowd. The teenager's mind was spinning. He could still feel the fear from earlier, the sense of helplessness that came when authority figures treat you like you are guilty without reason. Yet alongside the fear was a new feeling, a sense of protection, a recognition that someone could step in and change the course of events with skill, courage, and authority. He felt proud and reassured that his mother was there, though he also knew that not every kid in his shoes would have someone who could intervene so effectively. The mother continued to address the officers, her voice steady and unwavering. "You should know better than this. You are supposed to serve and protect, not assume guilt, not intimidate, and certainly not traumatize a child. You need to reflect on your training, your actions, and the message this sends to the community you claim to protect." She gestured toward the teenager, emphasizing the human impact of their choices. "This is a young man, a student, a member of the community. And yet you treated him as if he were dangerous simply because of assumptions. That is unacceptable." The officers swallowed hard. They glanced at one another, clearly unsure how to respond. They had been confident moments ago, certain that they were in control. But the presence of a federal agent and the clear articulation of their wrongdoing shifted the balance entirely. Their earlier authority was gone, replaced by unease and the dawning understanding that their actions were being judged not only by law, but by morality and witness accounts. Meanwhile, The teenager tried to steady his breathing. He could feel his mother's hand on his shoulder, reassuring, grounding him. "You did nothing wrong," she whispered. "Remember that. Stay calm." He nodded, drawing strength from her presence. Even though the embarrassment and fear still lingered, he felt a new sense of clarity. He had witnessed how knowledge, training, and calm authority could influence outcomes, and he understood in a way he never had before the difference between power used responsibly and power used recklessly. Some of the bystanders began speaking up, their voices small but firm. "He didn't do anything," one said. "You had no reason to treat him like that." The mother acknowledged them briefly with a nod but kept her focus on the officers. She knew that any deviation could allow the situation to escalate again. She needed full attention on her, and the officers' understanding of the seriousness of their actions. Every eye on the scene mattered. Every whisper of accountability added weight to her words. The teenager's mother then shifted slightly, moving closer to the officers, her presence almost magnetic. "I want a supervisor here immediately," she commanded. "You will explain your actions and there will be accountability." She did not raise her voice, but the clarity and authority in her tone left no room for argument. The officers hesitated, then finally reached for their radios. It was clear that the situation had escalated beyond their control, and they were fully aware of it. The teenager watched everything unfold, feeling a mixture of emotions. The fear of moments ago still lingered, but now it was accompanied by a profound sense of safety. He realized that authority could be wielded to protect as much as it could intimidate, and that standing firm in the face of wrongdoing could change outcomes. His mother's calm, precise actions had prevented further escalation, and he could feel the relief coursing through him, even as the memory of being pushed down and threatened remained fresh. As they waited for the supervisor to arrive, the teenager's mother continued to guide him through the situation, explaining quietly what was happening and why. "Remember, these things happen sometimes, and it's not your fault," she said. "You have to stay calm and let the adults handle it. But also know that your voice matters. Never be afraid to speak up, even when it feels intimidating." The teenager nodded, absorbing every word. He felt a growing sense of maturity, understanding that fear, courage, and authority were all intertwined in moments like this. Finally, the supervisor arrived and the atmosphere shifted slightly once again. The teenager's mother introduced herself formally, showing her credentials. She laid out the situation clearly, detailing the actions of the officers and their impact on her son. The supervisor listened carefully, nodding, and at times glancing at the officers with a mixture of disbelief and concern. The mother's calm but firm explanation left no doubt that there had been a serious mistake, and that accountability was necessary. The teenager observed all of this, feeling a mixture of relief and pride. The supervisor asked the officers to explain themselves, and though they attempted to justify their actions, the mother's words and presence dominated the conversation. She emphasized the importance of community trust, fairness, and proper procedure. The officers, now fully aware of the seriousness of their actions, could only respond quietly, acknowledging that they had misjudged the situation. As the immediate tension began to dissipate, the teenager's mother remained vigilant, ensuring that her son stayed safe and that no further issues arose. She guided him away from the officers, her hand on his shoulder, reassuring him with every step. The crowd slowly began to disperse, many still whispering and recording, but the focus had shifted from the confrontation to the lesson being taught: accountability, fairness, and the responsible use of authority. The teenager felt a mix of lingering fear and newfound understanding. He had been scared, humiliated, and powerless moments ago. Now he felt a sense of protection, safety, and clarity. He realized that authority could be a force for good when guided by knowledge, training, and moral courage. He had witnessed the difference between reckless power and responsible intervention, and it had left a lasting impression on him. The sun was dipping lower, casting long shadows across the street. The ordinary day he had expected had been transformed into a powerful lesson in fear, authority, protection, and accountability. The teenager walked beside his mother, holding his backpack close, absorbing every detail of the moment. He understood in a way he hadn't before, how quickly life could shift, how assumptions could put someone in danger, and how courage and presence could make all the difference. He also understood that the lessons he had learned today were not just about himself. but about the kind of world he wanted to live in and help create. Even as the crowd dispersed and the street returned to a semblance of normalcy, the teenager knew that nothing would feel quite the same again. He had experienced fear and relief, humiliation and protection, and the clear demonstration of how authority could be used responsibly. The events of the day would stay with him, shaping his understanding of justice, courage, and accountability for years to come. And he knew with certainty that having someone who truly understood authority and courage had changed the course of what could have been a dangerous encounter into a lesson in safety, fairness, and human dignity. The supervisor arrived just moments later, his presence signaling a shift in authority. The tension in the air was palpable, as the officers who had confronted the teenager now stood awkwardly, unsure of how to proceed. The teenager's mother, calm but unyielding, approached the supervisor and introduced herself formally. She showed her credentials, clearly establishing her role and authority, and then began explaining the situation in detail. The supervisor listened intently, nodding occasionally, his eyes shifting between the teenager, the officers, and the growing crowd of onlookers. The teenager stayed close to his mother, feeling the lingering fear from earlier but also drawing strength from her steady presence. Every word she spoke carried authority and purpose, leaving no room for misunderstanding. She outlined what had happened, emphasizing the fear and humiliation her son had experienced, and pointed out that the officers had acted without proper justification. One of the officers tried to speak, offering their side of the story, mentioning that they had been following a description. The mother's eyes narrowed slightly. A description of a child walking home with a backpack? Is that what you call a description? She asked sharply. Her voice was calm, precise, and carried the weight of experience. You targeted a minor, drew your weapons, and caused unnecessary fear and distress. That is unacceptable. You need to understand the consequences of your actions. The officers shifted uneasily, realizing that they had been caught in a serious error. The supervisor intervened, asking for clarity and details about the incident. The teenager's mother spoke clearly and calmly, recounting each step, each action that had escalated unnecessarily. She described how the officers had ignored his attempts to explain himself, how they had pushed him toward the ground, and how bystanders had watched the entire incident unfold. Her words painted a vivid picture, leaving the supervisor with no doubt that accountability was necessary. Meanwhile, the teenager remained close to his mother, listening and processing. He could still feel the adrenaline from moments ago, but he was also beginning to understand the larger lesson unfolding. He saw how knowledge, authority, and moral courage could influence outcomes. He realized that while fear could paralyze, a steady and experienced hand could restore safety and order. The feeling of relief was strong, but so was a sense of awe at witnessing how carefully handled authority could correct a mistake. The crowd around them continued to murmur, some whispering, others recording on their phones. Many were impressed by the composure and clarity of the mother, noting how she managed to maintain control while protecting her son. Others expressed concern for the teenager, recognizing the vulnerability of his situation. The presence of the supervisor added legitimacy and weight to the confrontation, ensuring that the officers could not dismiss their actions lightly. The teenager's mother continued to address the officers, highlighting the importance of respecting the community and treating every individual fairly. You are supposed to protect and serve, she said, not assume guilt based on appearance, and certainly not intimidate or humiliate a child. You must reflect on your actions, your training, and the impact of your decisions on those you are sworn to protect. Her words were firm but measured, a demonstration of authority and moral clarity that left no room for excuses. The officers nodded quietly, acknowledging their mistake. Their earlier confidence had vanished, replaced by a dawning awareness of the seriousness of their actions. They realized that their behavior had not only affected the teenager, but had also been witnessed by the community, creating a ripple effect that could damage trust and credibility. The supervisor took notes, listening carefully, and occasionally asking questions to ensure he fully understood the sequence of events. The teenager felt a mixture of emotions, relief, pride, lingering fear, and growing understanding. He realized the significance of what he had witnessed, how authority, when wielded responsibly and ethically, could protect and correct mistakes. He also understood the vulnerability that existed when authority is misapplied, and how easily assumptions could escalate into fear and danger. His mother's intervention had changed the trajectory of the day entirely, turning what could have been a traumatic event into a lesson in accountability and protection. The supervisor then addressed the officers, instructing them to provide a formal account of their actions and to document the incident thoroughly. He emphasized the need for accountability, training, and reflection to prevent similar situations from occurring in the future. The teenager's mother observed carefully, ensuring that the instructions were clear and that no further actions would escalate unnecessarily. Her presence remained a steadying influence both for her son and for the officers involved. The teenager, still holding his backpack, watched the interactions closely. He felt a sense of empowerment even though he had been powerless just moments ago. He recognized the importance of speaking up and having someone who understands authority and justice to guide and protect him. He also began to reflect on the broader implications. How many other children might face similar situations without anyone to advocate for them? And how essential it is to have accountability and moral courage in positions of authority. The mother continued to speak to both the supervisor and the officers, reinforcing the need for proper procedure and respect for the community. She explained how the officers' assumptions had created unnecessary fear and tension, and how such actions could undermine trust between law enforcement and the public. She emphasized the importance of empathy, awareness, and measured responses in all interactions, especially with minors. The teenager felt the weight of the lesson settle in. He had experienced fear, humiliation, and vulnerability, but he had also seen courage, authority, and moral responsibility in action. The presence of his mother had not only protected him, but had also provided a clear example of how to handle high-pressure situations with skill, composure, and fairness. He understood that the lessons from this day would stay with him, shaping his perspective on justice, authority, and personal responsibility. As the situation began to de-escalate, the mother guided her son to a safer distance, away from the officers and the immediate crowd. She continued to reassure him quietly, emphasizing that he had done nothing wrong and that he was safe. The teenager nodded, feeling a mixture of lingering fear and growing confidence. He realized that courage and authority, when exercised correctly, could protect and guide, while fear and assumptions, if unchecked, could cause harm and distress. The crowd gradually dispersed, some still whispering, others recording the aftermath. The officers were left to follow the supervisor's instructions, documenting their actions and reflecting on the consequences. The teenager's mother remained vigilant, ensuring that her son remained safe and that the situation did not escalate further. She knew that the lesson being taught extended beyond her family. It was a reminder to the community and to those in positions of authority about the importance of accountability, fairness, and measured responses. The teenager walked beside his mother, holding his backpack tightly, absorbing the full impact of what had occurred. The ordinary day he had expected had been transformed into an experience that was both frightening and instructive. He had witnessed fear, authority, accountability, and protection, all intertwined in a single event. He understood the fragility of safety and the importance of standing firm when injustice occurs. He also recognized the profound effect one person with knowledge, courage, and moral clarity could have on the outcome of a tense situation. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the street, the teenager reflected on the lessons of the day. He had been frightened, humiliated, and vulnerable, yet he had also seen protection, authority, and justice in action. The presence of his mother had turned a potentially traumatic encounter into a lesson in responsibility, fairness, and the proper use of authority. He knew that the events of this day would stay with him for a long time, shaping his understanding of courage, accountability, and the importance of moral action. The teenager felt a mixture of relief, pride, and growing understanding as he walked beside his mother. He had experienced fear and humiliation, but he had also witnessed courage and authority exercised responsibly. He realized that even ordinary days could hold extraordinary lessons, and that sometimes it takes someone with experience, knowledge, and moral clarity to turn a dangerous moment into safety and understanding. The events of this day would remain with him, guiding his thoughts, actions, and understanding of justice for years to come. The day that had started like any other now came to a close, but its impact on the teenager and those around him was far from over. The ordinary afternoon had turned into an extraordinary experience that left lasting impressions of fear, courage, and accountability. He walked beside his mother, still holding his backpack, reflecting on everything that had happened. His heart was calmer now, but the memory of being stopped, pushed, and treated like a criminal remained vivid. It was a humbling reminder of how quickly ordinary life could turn chaotic and frightening. Once they were at a safe distance, the mother spoke quietly to her son. "You handled yourself well. I know it was scary, but you stayed calm, and that made a difference." The teenager nodded, feeling the weight of her words. He realized that staying composed in the face of fear was not easy, but it was essential. Her reassurance provided a grounding that allowed him to process the day's events. Without panic, the mother decided to call the department to ensure the situation was fully documented, and that the officers would be held accountable. She explained everything to the supervisor, emphasizing that proper procedure had been ignored and that her son had been put at unnecessary risk. Her voice was calm and precise, leaving no room for doubt about the seriousness of the incident. The department promised to investigate fully, and the officers involved were temporarily relieved from duty pending review. The teenager listened as his mother spoke on the phone, feeling a sense of justice being served. He realized how important it was to have someone who understood the system and could navigate it effectively. He also thought about other young people who might not have that protection, and it made him more aware of the inequalities that exist in everyday life. Fear, he understood now, could be amplified by assumptions and bias, but knowledge and authority could also protect and empower. After the call, the mother walked him home, ensuring that he felt safe and supported every step of the way. They moved slowly, talking quietly about what had happened and why it mattered. She encouraged him to speak about his feelings, to acknowledge the fear and humiliation he had experienced. The teenager found that putting his emotions into words helped him regain a sense of control. He described how it felt to be stopped, how powerless he had felt, and how relieved he was when she arrived. The mother listened carefully, nodding and validating his experiences. "It's okay to feel scared and frustrated. What you went through was unfair, and your feelings are valid, but you also showed resilience by staying calm, and that is something to be proud of." The teenager reflected on her words, realizing that strength was not just about standing up to fear physically, but also about maintaining composure and clarity in tense situations. He began to understand that courage could take many forms, and that even small acts of calm and reason could have a powerful impact. By the time they reached home, the sun was setting, casting warm light through the windows. The teenager felt a sense of relief settling over him. He was physically safe, but the lessons of the day were now his to carry. He thought about how easily a misunderstanding could escalate, and how important it was to have someone who could intervene wisely. He also considered how he might use this experience to help others, to be aware of fear, authority, and fairness in the future. In the days that followed, the incident became a topic of conversation among neighbors, classmates, and friends. Footage captured by onlookers circulated online, prompting discussions about accountability, bias, and the responsibilities of law enforcement. Many expressed outrage at how quickly the situation had escalated, and many praised the mother's calm and decisive intervention. The teenager observed these reactions quietly, feeling a mix of pride and reflection. He understood that his personal experience had also sparked broader awareness, and that this was an important step in promoting understanding and change. The mother continued to guide him through the aftermath, helping him process his emotions and thoughts. She encouraged him to speak at school assemblies about his experience, to share what he had learned about courage, authority, and fairness. Though initially hesitant, the teenager realized that telling his story could empower others and help prevent similar incidents. He began to see the value in his voice and the impact it could have on his community. When he spoke to his classmates, he shared the fear he had felt, the humiliation of being treated unfairly, and the relief of having someone intervene responsibly. He emphasized the importance of staying calm in difficult situations and of advocating for oneself when treated unjustly. The students listened attentively, many nodding in understanding. Teachers praised him for his honesty and courage, recognizing that he had turned a frightening experience into a learning opportunity for everyone. The teenager also began to think about his future. He realized that the experience had shaped his perspective on justice, fairness, and authority. He became interested in learning more about law, civil rights, and how systems could be improved to prevent misunderstandings and bias. The incident that had initially filled him with fear now inspired him to consider how he might contribute to a more just and fair society. He understood that personal experiences, even painful ones, could be catalysts for growth and purpose. Throughout this time, his mother remained a constant source of guidance and support. She encouraged him to reflect, to ask questions, and to explore his feelings without judgment. She reinforced the lessons of responsibility, accountability, and moral courage. He learned that mistakes could happen, but that how people responded to those mistakes, taking responsibility, correcting them, and learning from them was what truly mattered. As the weeks went by, the teenager noticed changes in himself. He felt more aware of his surroundings, more confident in his ability to handle tense situations calmly, and more thoughtful about the actions of others. He realized that fear could be managed and that courage could take many forms, from speaking up to remaining composed under pressure. The experience had given him insights into both human behavior and the importance of authority being used responsibly. The incident also prompted conversations within his family and community about racial profiling bias and the need for better training and awareness among law enforcement. The teenager listened and participated, offering his perspective and sharing what he had learned. His mother continued to be a mentor, helping him navigate these discussions with clarity, empathy, and understanding. Together, they contributed to a growing awareness of the importance of fairness, accountability, and community trust. Looking back on that day, the teenager understood that it had been a turning point in his life. What began as a simple walk home had evolved into a profound lesson about fear, courage, justice, and the impact one person could have in correcting a wrong. He had experienced vulnerability, but he had also witnessed strength, authority, and moral clarity in action. He knew that the lessons he had learned would stay with him forever, shaping how he saw the world and how he interacted with it. The ordinary streets that had seemed so safe and familiar now held a new meaning for him. They reminded him of how quickly assumptions could lead to fear, how fragile safety could be, and how powerful, calm, knowledgeable intervention could be. He felt a renewed sense of purpose and responsibility, understanding that his experiences could help guide others and contribute to positive change. As he prepared for bed that night, he reflected on the journey of the day. He had felt fear, humiliation, relief, and pride. He had learned that authority could protect or harm, that courage came in many forms, and that accountability was essential. Most importantly, he understood that standing firm in the face of injustice, whether as a witness, a bystander, or a participant, could make a difference. The teenager drifted to sleep with these thoughts, carrying both the weight and the wisdom of the day with him. He knew that life would continue to present challenges and uncertainties, but he also knew that he had learned lessons that would help him navigate them. The ordinary day that had begun like any other had transformed into an extraordinary experience, shaping his understanding of justice, courage, and the power of moral authority. And with the guidance of his mother, he felt prepared to face the world with a new sense of awareness, empathy, and resilience.